Is that all yet? Here we go. Okay. Let's start with the questions, and that should help mine out what this chapter really attempts to put forth for us for our study and our edification. The title is, this is 11, Whatever You Think, Thought Purifying Decisions. Again, this is Domino Effect. That's the idea and theme of the book. So our thoughts lead to our actions, which he deals with in the chapter. And so it really helps us get to the core of making good choices and putting ourselves in the right direction for the Lord. So let's start there with question 1. What is the meaning of Proverbs 23:7 when it says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he"? What is the meaning? And I understand in the context. Sorry, brother. I'm trying to stay right here. I'm sorry. I understand the actual context of Proverbs 23 is not dealing with it in the way that we usually refer to. Let's go there and let's look at the context because really the principle is the same. I mean, the teaching is the same as we usually would apply it, but that's not exactly what's being laid out for us. There in verse 4, we covered this in our devotional tonight, Proverbs 23. Labor not to be rich, cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. Eat thou not the bread of him that hath an evil eye, neither desire thou his dainty meats. For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee. What's the teaching here in this context? This man may be saying things that may indeed cause us to feel comfortable and everything's fine, but in reality, is he really looking out for our betterment? No. As he thinketh in his heart, so is he. In other words, not the words necessarily that are being said, but ultimately the person defined of who he is that which is ultimately lodged within his mind. It's as he thinks in his heart. So there's several ways in which we apply this today. And when you think of it in the way we usually apply it, what ultimately are we getting to? What are we warning of when we go to this passage? What's the concern?
If all you have on your mind is worldly things, that's the way you're going to live.
Sure. I mean, the warning for us is applying that passage for our own warning is, hey, look, if you're thinking about the world, if you're thinking about worldly things, if your focus is on those things that are temporary, then guess what you're going to become eventually? You're going to become worldly as well. And eventually your actions and your words will start to show that. Go with me to Matthew chapter 12, if you would. Matthew chapter 12, and can someone get for me there verse 34?
Brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Okay, so, eventually, if we continue to meditate and think about and invest our mind in these areas that are unrighteous, it's only a matter of time before that's who we become. And really, that's who we are. We are what we think. And if you look at the very beginning of the chapter, he has an interesting, I think it's a little poem. You may be familiar with it. I believe it's on page 98 at the bottom there. He says, "My mind is a garden, my thoughts are the seeds. My harvest will be either flowers or weeds." When you begin to think of it that way, it's, wait a second, what do I want my thoughts to be about? What do I want to be thinking about? I don't want to be thinking about things that ultimately are going to be producing fruit that are contrary to my efforts to serve the Lord. Let's go ahead and move over here. I think he deals with this at the very end of the chapter, but let's go to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4. And if someone can get for me their verse 8, Philippians chapter 4.
Brothers and sisters, think about the things that are good and worthy of praise. Think about the things that are true and honorable and right and pure and beautiful and respected.
Okay. The takeaway there is our thoughts, our dwellings, our mind wanderings should be on the Lord and should be on those things that are righteous. It should not be on things that are going to produce fruits of unrighteousness. Look with me in Galatians chapter 6, and if someone can get for me there verse 7. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7.
Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap.
Okay, so very similar to this poem on page 98. My mind is a garden, my thoughts are the seeds, my harvest will be either flowers or weeds. I mean, whatsoever a man sows, that will he also reap. Well, are we sowing by thinking? We are, right? I mean, we just started off, the question is in Proverbs 23 and verse 7. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So what am I doing when I'm thinking? I'm becoming something. The more and more I think of a certain way of life, the more and more I'm going to begin to adopt that way of life. God gives us great emphasis on where our mind ultimately should be going. Let's go to Psalm 1, and if someone could read the chapter for me, it's 6 verses. Psalm 1 and the full chapter.
Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish.
I mean, this passage is very clear as to the two options we have. We can either be chaff, we can be that which will be destroyed, that which is unfruitful and unpurposeful, or we can be fruitful. And to get to fruitfulness, what is required beforehand? Does it just happen?
Plant the fruit in your heart.
Yeah, you have to plant that which ultimately will produce fruit. Absolutely. In verse 2, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. My concern and heartbreak, if you will, for brethren, for example, who struggle with very open, simple things that anyone could point to as evidence to faithfulness, such as attending services, such as maybe the language they're using, the behaviors they're involved in, that when brethren are involved in those kinds of actions or the avoidance of those kinds of actions, the deeper concern is those actions are a result of something much deeper, which is what? The failure to be planting the proper seed in one's heart and mind. If we're planting seed on a continual basis and we're meditating on God's law night and day, is coming to services, is forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, Hebrews chapter 10, 24 and following, even a question? I mean, we're meditating on the law of God. So it's like, it's not even, something that's up for debate. It's something that is joyously anticipated. And I've heard elders say before, worship isn't an attendance problem. It is a heart problem. And that's ultimately what folks who say those kinds of things are pointing to is if the outward and most obvious actions and behaviors are not in accordance with God's will, then I'm sure elders really have difficult times thinking, well, wow, we're on the 1 yard line when we need to be on the 95th yard line here. There's some deeper challenges beyond just the most obvious of these behaviors. Let's go to Psalm 119. Psalm 119, and look with me there in verse 97. Someone could read that for me.
Oh, how I love thy law, it is my meditation all the day.
Okay, so again, an attitude toward God's law. Oh, how I love thy law. What are the temptations that we have as to how we should view God's law? What does the world encourage as to how it should be viewed? Or how do they view it?
It's just a suggestion.
It's a suggestion. That's great, right? It's not that important. It's a suggestion. It's guidance that shouldn't
It's not,
necessarily be taken
it's
serious.
not any more correct than the Chicago Tribune.
That's right too, right? It's maybe filled with error, so it's not even trustworthy potentially.
Well, this boy told me at work today, I said, I was going to church tonight, and he said, you go to church? I said, 3 times a week. I said, but I quit driving at night, and I said, unless I don't have a ride. He said, I would never darken a church house door. And I'm going, I mean, that was his
That's what he
exact
said.
words.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if that kind of attitude is along the lines of, it's a bunch of rules. I mean, I don't know, but sometimes people have that view of the Bible. Well, there's a bunch of rules that I don't want to deal with. The description and commands that we're seeing in the Bible is not that it's rules, but that it's loved. It's loved. It's cherished. And so looking at it the right way is going to impact our willingness to fill ourselves with it. Who wants to fill themselves with something that they think is against them, that they think is untrustworthy, and they think is just a suggestion, that they think is just a bunch of rules? Nobody wants to deal with that. Hannah knows I don't like rules at all. We're getting ready to go on this trip, and there's all these rules, and I just keep telling her, all these rules, I can't handle this. Nobody wants to do that. But when we look at this for what it is, it's not rules.
It's a guide.
It is the only guide to life. Absolutely. When we look at it that way, then it's like, wait a second, God's not trying to hurt me here. God wants to protect me. God is trying to get me to heaven so I can be with him. I love thy law. See, it completely transforms the way that we view it. And then filling ourselves with it isn't something that we dread. It's something that we long for and that we're thankful for.
That's the big thing I run into is people feel like that the Bible or church is going to interfere with the way they want to live, their lifestyle. They're having fun. They're doing whatever they want to do.
Right.
So they don't even want to look at it.
Right. Right. And that proves their lack of trust in God. That proves their insistence that the temporary is far greater than the eternal. Because when we think about heaven and we think about what's the most important decision I could ever make, and that is wanting to go to heaven, and I make that continually, I need to constantly be thinking that, then those things that maybe I once desired now seem so meaningless because that's no longer my goal. And so it kind of goes back to the whole, when we all think we're going to heaven, one way is just more convenient than the other, when that's a lie in and of itself as well. Yeah, that's a great point. Any other points on this first question? What is the meaning of Proverbs 23:7? As a man thinks in his heart, so is he.
Son, I've got, in a New International Version,
Okay.
and, starting in verse 6 there, it says, do not eat the food of the begrudging host, do not crave his delicacies, for he is the kind of person who is always thinking about the cost. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you.
Right.
It says it a little bit different, and I don't know which basically here in this, it would be the person who is telling you, eat, enjoy my food, at the same time, he's
Doesn't.
counting the pennies.
Yeah.
Well, who is he? Is he the one that's staying, eat, and enjoy? Or is he the person who's worried about the cost? Well, he's the person that's worried about the cost, is what that means. So even though he says one thing, he's thinking another.
Correct.
But sometimes I think when we say, poor man thinks in his heart, so is he. I guess what that's saying is, he's not who he says he is.
Correct.
He's who he thinks he is that matters.
Correct. Correct. So although in the action of his words, it sounds as though he wants the betterment of this individual, he wants him to eat, he wants him to be merry, in reality his mind does not desire the betterment, but his mind is actually in pain and is not in any way seeking that this individual eat up. And so the heart contradicts the words, but the heart is what is ultimately defining the person. And that's the takeaway. And that's, again, what we can think about when we think about what we're thinking about. Is, I can be saying the right things all day long. Have you ever met people or a group or been involved in something where people are saying the right things? And you keep realizing that they don't actually believe what it is they're saying because their actions are not supporting their words. So they're saying a lot of things, and you come to realize that's not really what they think.
People pride themselves in that ability.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it's looked at as a good thing, right? But who really is that person? What do you eventually say about that person? You eventually say, well, I'm not going to pay any attention to those words. I know that they're meaningless or that they're of little worth or value, because in reality, the actions and what I've seen play out over time with this person, the words are contradictory to what they really think and who they really are. And I'm sure you can think of people and know of people or situations where that occurs. I mean, I know at work this happens all the time. And you see the words start coming and you think, well, maybe we're starting to, kind of coalesce around something here. And then the action's not there. It's like, well, not yet, I guess. And that's just one example. Something maybe a little bit more along the lines of this actual passage is, to the very point, is kind of knowing certain people, whether it be family members or friends. Well, I know how they really think about this, and I don't want to in any way spend what it is or take what it is they're offering, because I know I'll never hear the end of it, or I know they really don't want to give it to me, right?
I think something, and I kind of discussed this with you the other day, back in, I don't know what chapter this is, on page 92, it really impressed me that when Tim, and it's real funny, he moved to Mount Vernon, Missouri, which is where I went to church before I came here, and his mentor had come to do a gospel meeting, and he said, I remember sitting next to him during communion. As prayers were being offered and the tray was being passed, I looked over at my mentor and saw tears streaming down his cheeks. He was weeping. Avon loved Jesus so much. That kind of passion for the Lord is extremely contentious. It makes other people hunger and thirst for him.
Right.
And I thought that was it really stuck with me.
Right.
When I read it, that, that's really showing a passion for God.
Right.
And Christ.
Right. And the sensitivity that is evident by the tears, you would assume, that they're genuine, is something that we all struggle to wrap our minds around. At least I do. I imagine you all are in the same boat on a weekly basis when we partake of the Lord's Supper. Am I thinking the right thoughts? Am I really contemplating what this is all about? Or am I just, kind of as we talked even in our devotional tonight, am I just, partaking of the Lord's Supper and, let me get my check and everything else? Are we really thinking about it? So that's a great example of actually contemplating and deeply thinking, based on the tears at least, it would seem, right
that he was genuine.
thoughts. Yeah, right. All right, let's go on to question 2. Eve sinned because she allowed the devil to change her thoughts about God's command. How does the devil do this to us today? How does the devil do this to us
He
today?
tries to make things look good.
Yes, right, exactly like he did with Eve, right? His modus operandi is to fool us in thinking that what God has directly and clearly warned us of maybe isn't all that bad. And maybe isn't that much of an issue. Look with me in Proverbs 2. Proverbs chapter 2. And if someone could read for me there verses 10 through 22. Proverbs chapter 2, 10 through 22.
When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things, who leads the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil, and delight in the forwardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they forward in their paths. Deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, neither take thy hold of the paths of life, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men, and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it.
Okay, so you see where wisdom takes us, and you see the temptation to pull us away. Let's flip over as well to Proverbs chapter 5. Proverbs chapter 5, and if someone could read for me 1 through 14.
My son, attend unto my wisdom, and bow thine ear unto mine understanding, that thou mayest regard discretion, and that thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as an honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down unto death, her steps take hold on hell. Lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life, her ways are movable, that thou canst not know them. Hear me now, therefore, O ye children, and depart not from the words of my mouth. Remove thy way far from her, and come not nigh to the door of her house, lest thou give thine honor unto others, and thy years unto the cruel. Lest strangers be filled with thy wealth, thy labors be in the house of a stranger, and thou mourn at the last, when thy flesh and thy body are consumed, and say, How have I hated instruction, and my heart despised reproof, and have not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined mine ear to them that instructed me. I was almost in all evil in the midst of the congregation and assembly.
Okay, so again, the temptation that is the opposite, the antithesis of the wisdom that will guide us and preserve us in verses 10 through 22 of Proverbs 2. Here, some more details about that strange woman. You saw the strange woman was mentioned first in verse 16 of what we read, and now it's being laid out again. Notice there, verse 3, for the lips of a strange woman drop as an honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. I mean, the impression, the attempt to paint over sin and cause it to look appealing and attractive, it's not just evident in these scenarios that are being given here, but it's in all areas of sin. This is what Satan does. God tells us to avoid something. God tells us to remove ourselves from something, verse 8. And Satan tries to paint it up real pretty and nice and shiny and say, oh, no, you don't need to remove yourself from that. Look at the strength here of God's words in chapter 4. Chapter 4, notice with me verses 14 and 15. Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and pass away. I mean, could God be any more clear? Get away. Drop down, verse 25. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. I mean, God is plain as day here. And when we think about what Satan did to Eve, you're right. It has not changed at all. It is the exact same story. What Satan is trying to do is paint us a pretty billboard telling us to get off the highway and to cross over onto another exit. Hey, come try this. Come give this a taste. Come experiment with this. Come give this a try. It's not that bad. Look at it. It looks just wonderful. It hasn't changed. It's exactly what he did with Eve. And what did Eve say? Well, hey, this fruit here, it's going to make me wise. It looks pleasant. It's going to probably taste good. I'll just go ahead and eat from it. Not thinking about the commandments of God. Folks, Satan doesn't try to draw us away with things that aren't appealing or enticing. He tries to paint up things that God clearly warns us about and tries to make them look as attractive and as appealing as he can. And God is very, very plain. Avoid it. Avoid it. And so on that thought, what should our minds be filled with?
Godly things.
Say it again.
Godly
things, right? I mean, because if we're filling our minds with these ideas and these thoughts and these songs and these, all kinds of media that exists out there, if that's what's going into our minds, then we're not avoiding it, the path God tells us to avoid. We're not turning away from it. We're not removing ourselves from it. We're not not passing by. What we're actually saying is, let me see if I can just get a little close. And folks, all sin doesn't start off to the full extreme. It doesn't start that way. Certain classes of sin, that is. It starts with a progression. And usually that ultimately is sprouted in the heart. Any other comments on the comparison between Genesis 3 and the way in which Satan works today? No?
He still tries to disguise sin as something that's desirable, something
Right.
that's going to do you more good than God.
Yeah, right.
So that's the same basic thing.
Right. In other words, avoid the commandments of God that tell you to avoid it. Because this is going to do you, to your point, better or good, and more so than what God could offer. Proverbs 6 and verse 27. Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? I mean, why do we want to mess around with fire? But, again, and really this chapter deals with it. We didn't really lay it out as it's given in the chapter. But the thoughts aren't just all good thoughts. It's removing the bad thoughts, and not just removing the bad thoughts. It's removing the bad thoughts and filling thoughts with good. He uses, for example, on page 102, Matthew 12, 43 through 45, and I'll just read it right here out of the book. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. This is Matthew 12, 43 through 45. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. So shall it be with this wicked generation. It's not just avoiding the wrong paths, it's also going full speed ahead down the good paths. It's both. both. All right? Any other comments on that one?
You know, the devil's not dumb.
Right.
He knows each of our weaknesses.
Right.
And he's not gonna try to attack us, tempt us with things that we're strong against.
Right.
He's gonna try to find our weaknesses.
That's right. And he's not going to
He's
stop.
gonna keep gnawing and
That's
gnawing
right.
and gnawing.
He walketh about like a roaring lion. He doesn't just take a break and stop. I mean, he's going to keep trying to figure out a way and keep laying things before us. And we just need to get really used to the fact that I need to desire the old paths. That's the good way. That's where I long to be. I'm not interested in veering off over here and veering off over there. I love the good paths. All right, let's look at question 3. What are some ways today's Christians could fill their minds with bad thoughts? And then let's go ahead and use 4 as well. Strategies for replacing bad thoughts with good thoughts. So first, how do people, or how could we be tempted to fill our minds with bad thoughts? But then what are some strategies to actually replace those bad thoughts with good thoughts?
TV is not the replacement, but
Yeah, the bad, right? The media, not all. And I
Not
know,
all, right.
Yeah, I know you were saying not all TV, right? But absolutely, there's certain things that we don't need to really be filling our minds with. I know some people, don't like to hear that, but everything on television is not good for us.
A lot of things on television are good.
Yeah, I mean, right?
You gotta watch Nickelodeon.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess to the point where Disney Junior may be one of the only channels. No, I'm teasing.
She cracks me up because she will watch Disney. I'm like, man, there's not even kids here. I mean, how can you say that?
Yeah, right.
But all the old shows from back when we were kids.
Yeah, they were clean back then, for the most
that's why I
part.
said it's Nickelodeon. It's just certain channels.
Right.
And I was like, that thing is like 30 years old.
Right.
that we're
Right.
watching. But you sit there for a minute and they are entertaining.
Yeah, they are.
And
Right.
they get away with humor and stuff, and they don't have to use bad language.
Right,
They
exactly,
don't have-
right.
It's just amazing. And you look at the crap that's on TV now, and it's like, why can't they make something like that again?
I know,
Because
I know.
obviously there's
Right.
people who will watch it because they got Nickelodeon.
Right. Well, and I mean, behind the scenes in reality, which is maybe a heartening reality for us in a way, a lot of them are losing money. I mean, really, the ones that are doing the worst financially have a lot of this trash, and even entire movie production studios have learned. They've figured out if we just do nothing but put out trash every single year, we don't make any money. And so that's why really you've seen a rise in some of these more wholesome, kind of shows and movies. Not, I think, to the full extent that we would like, but somewhat of a turn. It's because of their pocketbooks, what it boils down to. They realize nobody's watching this.
I look at some of the stuff that they put, you look at the programs.
Right.
And it's like they try to think of the worst possible
Correct.
thing
Correct.
that they could possibly put together, and that's what they put together.
Right, correct.
It's like, really? That's what we're gonna put on TV?
Right.
I'm like, who really wants to see that?
Right.
But evidently, well, I think people must, because like I said, they're putting it out.
Right. And in reality, there's a small but loud group of the population that they hear, and that's what they pay attention. So media is absolutely one. Absolutely one. You could say friends, and he deals with 1 Corinthians 15:33, evil company corrupts good habits, is one translation of that passage. What are strategies for replacing bad thoughts with good?
Realize our weaknesses and concentrate on God's word to help that weakness.
Absolutely. And he lays out, we'll just high level for a second, cleaning house, 103 to 106. He basically says, read and memorize God's word, which you just mentioned, George. Pray, sing, and fellowship. Those are his suggestions, and I think we can all point to commandments and scriptures that would emphasize that we do those things, and it would begin helping us think more godly. Thank you all very much for the class. Enjoyed it, and we will miss you tremendously when we are.
We will miss
Not as
you
much
too.
as we can make out.
Yeah, not as much as we're gonna miss them.